Hello, my name is Claire Sprouse. I have a platform called Outlook Good that addresses climate change through food and beverage. And I also own a small bar and restaurant in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, which is where we're at today, called Hunky Dory. Human beings don't have a pollution problem, they have a design problem. This is a quote from the Upcycle, Beyond Sustainability. Even before it was articulated in this product design focused book, it is a notion that has been my North Star behind the bar for the last decade. From the minutiae of redesigning my cocktails and venues in order to work climate smarter and be more efficient, all the way to promoting greater advocacy and education to help my industry re-examine its role in climate change. Because of my work in this sector, and as a child of the Gulf Coast, I was asked to write about what the future of the South looked like 50 years from now, to redesign and imagine a future of my choosing, where food and beverage culture were inevitably shaped by climate change. In both the immediate and imagined distant future, my hope is that there is no way to talk about cocktails without talking about climate change. Within that, I also deeply believe that there is no way to talk about climate change, even based around a topic as seemingly benign as cocktails, without centering Black lives. They are whom climate change compounds suffering for the most, and they are the first to die at the hands of climate change, amongst many other things. Despite and also because of this, they are the first to fight on the front lines. Nowhere is this truer than the South. I would like to use this space and a trio of cocktail recipes to uplift a few voices within the Black community who are doing the work to build resilience and awareness around sustainability in the South.
Hi, I'm Krista Slater. I'm one of the owners of The Expat here in Athens, Georgia, and I have the privilege of making 3 cocktails for y'all by Claire Sprouse.
While this work might seem separate from food and beverage, it is factually not. It only emphasizes how they are all interdependent. 1 or 50 years from now, the names of these individuals, along with others working in climate change, should be as well known to food and drink enthusiasts as those whose names grace the recipes that already line our bookshelves and memory banks. Climate change manifests itself in invisible and very visible ways, both just as potentially dangerous. Like time, water is a threat that is hard to see coming because it moves so slowly. Rising tides are a good example of this. Miami will lose about 12 to 18 inches of land elevation due to upcoming rising sea levels, but it will happen over the next 50 years. Paulette Richardson and Valencia Gunder are longtime residents of Miami, Florida, specifically the Liberty City and Little Haiti neighborhoods, respectively. These areas are historically low income and predominantly populated by Black people, generationally marginalized by redlining and segregation, which over time has moved them further and further from the beachfront. However, 2 climate change-related issues are disrupting these dynamics. First, while increased hurricane activity has hammered down on more affluent properties with a view of the water, Paulettes and Valencia's neighborhoods are relatively well protected by their inland locations and high elevations. Second, likewise, these geographical features win out in projected situations regarding flood zoning. Miami is famous for a lot of things, including being the most vulnerable city in the world when it comes to rising sea levels contributed to global warming. In recent years, this has all drawn the attention of real estate developers, and that has been quickly followed by increased density, higher rents and mortgages, and displacement of Black people, again pushing them further away from what land is deemed desirable, not only yesterday and today, but even 50 years into the future. To sum up these economic and real estate responses to climate change, Paulette coined the term climate gentrification. And her and Valencia have been strong advocates for building land trust that protects against this and all gentrification. They have also done considerable work to raise awareness on how their communities can combat climate change. Watching the rising waters must also come with raising awareness of water conservation, which is not just for those where access to water is cut off by distance, money, or other inequities. Even in coastal areas like Miami, where water is often taken for granted because of its ubiquitousness and relative cheapness, there is a need to conserve water to protect aquifers and decrease our future reliance on intensive water processing, which contributes to increased climate change. What does this have to do with cocktails? I am obviously an advocate for addressing climate change, but also an advocate for well-made martinis. A cocktail of this nature can traditionally use up to 1 full liter, around 33 ounces of water, despite only 1 ounce of water actually being consumed in the cocktail itself. Over the years, I have redesigned my recipes to balance both my values and deliciousness, leaning into pre-batching and pre-diluting cocktails in the martini family, eliminating almost a full liter of fresh drinking water per drink consumed. Don't be mistaken, this all adds up, even at your home, or especially in a bar that serves hundreds or thousands of drinks a night. The accompanying Gibson recipe outlines this very simple method of conservation, as well as highlights a pickling recipe for traditional Haitian pickles in honor of Valencia's neighborhood, who is at the forefront of the climate gentrification issue. My second recipe. We are part of this ecology. It is our duty to maintain the natural resources around us. I heard this spoken by Colette Pichon-Battle at a talk earlier this year. Her work stretches from Florida to Texas as the executive director of the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy, which addresses climate change in the area from a multi-pronged approach. Not enough can be said about this work, which specifically draws connections between racism and climate justice issues. A quick rundown example of this is in Colette's home state of Louisiana, where the area between Baton Rouge and New Orleans is nicknamed Cancer Alley, due directly to the large presence of petrochemical plants. Their proximity to Black communities is not coincidence. There is a long history of environmental racism across the country, which has led to Black populated areas being exposed as quote-unquote sacrifice zones, a term coined by Dr. Robert Boulard in 1993 and defined as the discriminatory practice of choosing BIPOC communities as sites of toxic dumping. This includes not only the placement of waste disposal sites, but also the placement of extractive industries near Black people. In that talk mentioned earlier, Colette asked viewers, how can we individually and as a community develop to economically survive climate change? While agriculture accounts for 10% of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, I will double down on this and ask, can we reimagine a system of food that relies on and celebrates the crops and food sources who take up an active role in this fight? Like Colette, the red mulberry tree is a native of Louisiana, and its potential as a delicious ingredient in food and cocktails, like its use in the julep recipe that accompanies this essay and symposium, is only matched in uniqueness by its ability to positively impact the environment. The mulberry is a highly efficient carbon sink, meaning that it absorbs more carbon dioxide in the air than it produces, helping to lower the concentration of this greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. Along with this sequestered CO2, it easily absorbs other toxic pollutants from the air, and its roots are highly adept at absorbing carbon and heavy metal pollutants from the soil. The mulberry tree embodies an approach to food that prioritizes a higher regard for the secret lives of plants who do their own part to help us work against climate change. To be clear though, the mulberry does not even begin to address environmental racism, but in a small way does answer Colette's question of what an individual can do from a purchasing and consuming standpoint, which surely opens the doors for greater actions. Last, disposable land and wasted food equals lost flavors and lost opportunities to learn. The places I've called home would dot a map perfectly hugging the Gulf Coast from Texas to Florida, but Houston is where I lived the longest and where I am most proud to be from. It is also where Jeremy Peach started his company, Fresh Life Organics. Their mission is to provide agricultural assistance to urban and rural areas and answer a call for fresh vegetables. Jeremy is doing this work as a Black farmer in a country where Black farmers represent only 2% of our nation's farmers. Jeremy focuses on aquaponics, hydroponics, regenerative, and organic practices. Organic is an ideal that ultimately emphasizes land and water protection as well as food security. To even begin to think about a future 50 years from now, we must commit to and prioritize organic, along with prioritizing the investment in Black and Indigenous farmers' stewardship of our lands, and whom organic practices belong to long before they became co-opted buzzwords in the marketing of our food systems. In the non-alcoholic cocktail, featured along with this essay, I look towards some of the organic orchards in Jeremy's partner farms, specifically figs. These fruit-bearing trees grow well in Texas, but most often overlooked are their leaves, which go often unplucked and unused. They lend a grassy coconut profile to this drink, but are a perfect example of what we can do by re-examining our relationship to the land while questioning what so many of us don't typically value as flavorful or worthy of our plates and glasses. Thankfully, there are many cultures who historically use fig leaves and many others who have always prioritized honoring the use of whole plants in cooking and whose recipes we can reference for further uses. Imagining a future for who? These are not just recipes and insights I created conceptually by the request of the SFA. It is also a peek through the lens that I challenge myself and my peers to look through every single day. I believe in the productive power of visioning in order to work towards transformative changes in the hospitality industry. But I am also wary of this as a very common performative action by institutions, choosing an arbitrary date in the far future almost impossible to conceptualize, like asking someone what $1 billion physically looks like. We, bartenders, cooks, business owners, consumers, journalists, and so on, must ask ourselves if this is the type of narrative that sidesteps accountability, and if so, who is truly being served by this exercise. 50 years into the future is intangible and not worth imagining unless we can take a hard look at the period of the 10 years we exist in now, 2020 to 2030, which the authors of the 2016 Paris Agreement labeled as the critical decade. This is true for the issue at hand, but also many other long-needed changes that we are now confronting in the intersection of race, gender, hospitality, labor, agriculture, and of course, climate change. These questions simply cannot wait any longer to be answered. I ask again, imagining a future for who? Thank you.